So when I was a kid, I had a computer. When I was a kid, we got any Brits in the room? Must have some Brits in the room, right? So when I was a kid, I had a computer called a BBC Micro, and I bought that. Yes, beautiful machine. And I bought that machine in 1988 with my own money. It cost me £220 that I saved up. It was a very 1988. It was a very second-hand BBC, very battered second-hand BBC Micro at that point. And it was a wonderful machine because I would turn it on, and I did actually buy my computer to learn to program on. I think a lot of my friends have bought their computers for other reasons. But we almost all of us had them. We had them in our bedrooms, and for whatever reason we bought them, they all had one thing in common, which is you turn them on, and the BBC goes beep twice, and they give you a black screen with white text and a blinking cursor. And the very first thing you can do with that machine when you turn it on is to program it. And if you want to do something that isn't programming it, you have to choose not to program it. And regardless of why people have bought these machines, almost all of my friends knew how to at least write that two-line computer program, 10 print I am the best, 20 go to 10. Or 10 print something much filthier than that, 20 go to 10, and then go into the local computer store and type it into all of the machines, and then at the end run down the line, hitting enter on all of the machines, and run out of the door, and then watch through the window as the people ran around trying to get rid of the obscenities. And yeah, the 1980s was a simpler time, and that was kind of making our own entertainment. That was an app back then, and so we had a fantastic time doing this, what it meant was that everybody, I'm 35 years old, and everybody my age in the UK, I think most people my age in the developed world, who had any aptitude for computing, who had any interest in computing, had a chance to find out they had that aptitude and that interest, and had a platform sitting there in their bedroom with a blinking cursor that they could use to learn to become a computer programmer. So I went to Cambridge in 1995, and to get into Cambridge to study computer science. I actually got into Cambridge to study physics. And then I went through that grieving process as I discovered I wasn't actually very good at mathematics, and I ended up sliding down this curve that started with physics and ended up with business studies right down the bottom. Yeah. It's really, really, really humiliating. But I went to Cambridge in 1995, and I was good enough at maths to get into Cambridge. And to get into Cambridge to study computer science in 1995 was difficult. We had about 80 places on the course, and we had about 500 applicants for those places. And of those 500 applicants, you could rely on pretty much every single one of those people having had that computer in the corner of their bedroom and having learned to program. So people would come in the door at the age of 18. Cambridge has very short terms and only a 3-year course. So we actually have 60 weeks in Cambridge to turn you from a high school student into somebody who can start a UK 3-year PhD program. It was extremely useful to us as a university being able to assume when people came in the door on day one that they knew a bunch of stuff, that they'd already done their kind of Malcolm Gladwell 10,000 hours with a computer at the point where they came in the door. And in fact, the first thing we had to do with people was beat them over the head. The first thing they had to do to me was beat me over the head and convince me there was something left to learn. Fortunately, there's a thing called functional programming that some of you may have come across. That's a really great thing to beat 18-year-old kids who've been writing assembly language for 8 years and think they know everything. It's a great thing to beat them over the head with, to convince them that there's still stuff to learn. So that was 1995, and I slid down this curve. By 2005, I was involved in interviewing people who wanted to come to Cambridge to study computer science. And it was a really profoundly dispiriting experience, because what I found was that in that 10-year window, the number of people applying to study computer science at the University of Cambridge, which is probably the premier, we're one of the universities in the world that believes we were the first university to make a computer. We're very, very pleased with ourselves. And so we believe we're the premier place to go and study computer science in the UK. And our applicant numbers had halved, and the sorts of things that the people knew how to do when they came in the door had declined from 10 different sorts of assembly language down to might have written a web page. And we still only had 60 weeks to turn you into a computer science PhD student. And so a group of us, this is about 2005, started looking around to see what might have happened. We started looking for a hypothesis, and the hypothesis we came up with was that it was the disappearance of those machines, the disappearance of that class of machines like the BBC Micro, the C64, the TRS-80, those machines that lure you for whatever reason you buy them, that sit there and lure you into becoming a computer programmer. That the disappearance of those machines had contributed to this decline in our application ratio. So we started to ask ourselves, could we do something about it? We have the hypothesis that this is what's gone wrong. The alternate hypothesis, and the more depressing hypothesis, is that kids don't care anymore. Kids would much rather be on Facebook than learning to be computer programmers and mathematicians. So we started thinking, what could we make? Could we make a physical piece of hardware? Lots of people have tried to solve this problem using courseware and software and stuff. But we started to wonder, is there actually a niche in a child's bedroom for a piece of hardware that they can maybe buy for a different reason? Can we make something that they will buy for a different reason, but which will lure them back into computer programming? And we decided we wanted to build something that did 4 things. We wanted to have something which was programmable, obviously. We wanted to have something that we could bundle every programming tool under the sun onto. We wanted to have something which was interesting for something else, which was appealing to children. We can't just give them a C64. We can't just give them a 1980s-like computer because it's not interesting to them. They've grown up used to tablets and PlayStations and mobile phones. So we wanted to have something they could play great games on, something they could watch video on and go on Facebook on. We wanted to have something which was robust. We think that there's a really nice analogy between the way you teach people programming and the way you maybe teach them music. That a great way to teach somebody programming is to give them a small number of hours of focused formal tuition in school, and then to make sure they have an instrument that they can use to get their 4 hours of practice a night. So we wanted to have something, the vision was to have something that could be shoved into a school bag, taken to school, used for that 1 hour, shoved back in the school bag, taken home again and again and again without it breaking. And finally, we wanted to have something which was affordable. We were aware that we were going to be asking somebody to make a purchase, to buy something new in order to get this experience. And so we looked around and we asked ourselves, what can you ask children to buy? What can schools ask children to buy? And in the UK, we can ask children to buy textbooks. So we thought, well, what do textbooks cost? And we thought, well, $25 US, that's what a textbook costs. Now, it turns out that was perhaps a little optimistic, and we should have done more research. In fact, if we'd done more research at that point, we would have had a much easier job doing the engineering later on, because we wouldn't have been trying to design down to this mythical notion of what school textbooks cost. But we spent a lot of time trying different things, and about 2 years ago, we ended up with that, and that's a Raspberry Pi. It's almost exactly the size of a credit card. And it's a full-featured Linux box, and you can make them for $25. This is the deluxe version. This is the $35 version. It's got an Ethernet on it, so that's deluxe. It's got Ethernet, still not got a case for being deluxe. And we got these out into the world we launched them on February 29th, 2012, which was really stupid, because our first anniversary party wasn't up to much. We're going to have a really, really great 4th anniversary party. We're investing the money every year. So we launched these about 20 months ago. We just, at the end of October, shipped our 2 millionth Raspberry Pi. A lot of these have gone to people like the people in this room, right? Adults who already know stuff. However, we are starting to see some evidence that these are getting into the hands of children. They're getting into the hands of children via a bunch of routes at the moment. They're certainly not, at the moment, getting into the hands of children through formal deployment, formal widespread deployment through the education system. But they are getting into the hands of children through parents buying them, through children buying them themselves, grandparents, grandmothers buy an awful lot of these. Last Christmas, there was a big grandmother spike in Raspberry Pi sales. It seems like grandmothers are often like the bit of the family that buys the educational toys. There are a lot of confused grandchildren in January on our forums. So these are getting into the hands of kids. We think there are about 300,000 or 400,000. We really did think we were going to sell about 1,000 of these things. So there are 300,000 or 400,000 of these in the hands of kids today. And in terms of what I think our contribution is, what I hope our contribution is, and sort of harking back to something that Conrad was saying earlier, this idea of ubiquity is, I think, extremely important. There are computers already, and you can use computers to learn to program. It's very easy, in fact. We talk about how modern computers discourage you from programming, or at least don't lure you into programming. It only takes 5 minutes to go and download a copy of Python and install it on your PC. But the problem is, not all children have PCs, or at least have PCs that the adults around them are happy for them to go and install programming languages on. And not all people will make that 5-minute effort. So there's a massive difference between a computing platform that between 10 and 50% of people have, and some small proportion of those are prepared to go and install software on, and something which everyone can have, something you can equip a class with. You can equip a whole class of children with this for less than the cost of a laptop computer. and which comes bundled with all of the tools. So there is zero effort, there is zero friction between you and starting to do this stuff. So I'm really hopeful. This announcement today is a really big deal for us. I think we're starting to see evidence that the ubiquity of Raspberry Pi as a platform is contributing towards children learning to program. And we really do hope that the ubiquity of Mathematica and the Wolfram language on Raspberry Pi will start to do some of the same things for computer-based maths. So I'm going to leave.
There you go. Thank you very much, Eben.